Thank you all. And it's great to see everybody here. Welcome. My name is Deb Clearwaters. I'm the Director of Education and Interpretation at the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. And I hope you all are taking care of yourselves in this time of ongoing craziness with the pandemic and the violence in our nation's capital. I grew up inside the Beltway in suburban Maryland, and my mom used to work on the Hill. It's really hard to imagine what those workers went through that last week. I hope that all of you are doing whatever you can to stay safe and are finding ways to stay in the fight for racial justice in our democracy while also taking regular breaks to hear two songs at the same time from the harsh news. Music has been a real sustenance for me. Welcome to this behind the scenes program and focusing on I Look for the Sky by Chongbin. The program is being recorded and will be available on the museum's YouTube channel in a week or so. So I'd like to start out by briefly introducing our speakers in the order that they will appear. We will have Abby Chen, the head of the Contemporary Art program here at the Asian Art Museum, our Senior Associate Curator. She's been leading the newly established Contemporary Art department, and her team has been working crazy hard curating several new contemporary installations as part of the museum's nearly complete expansion. They've had a lot of challenges with the pandemic, but have soldiered on in kind of heroic ways, her and the preparators as well. And one of those installations is by Chongbin, but other notable ones that you can actually see from the street are a piece by Jennifer Wolford, a piece by Chanel Miller, and Jazz Chiranjiva. And coming soon, we have Jayashri Chakravarti and Lam Tung Pang, among other projects. Abby was previously at the Chinese Culture Center of San Francisco. That may be where you first encountered her. Of course, we have artist Zheng Chongbin. Throughout his 30-year career, Chongbin has held the classical ink tradition and the Western pictorial abstraction in productive mutual tension. And central to his art is the notion that the world is always in flux, and don't we know it, consisting of flows of matter and energy that repeatedly cohere and dissipate. Chongbin's education was as a classical Chinese figurative painter at the China Academy of Art in Hangzhou, where he taught. And also he's been resident in the Bay Area for about 30 years and is very inspired by our distinctive atmosphere and the environmental effects and rich ecologies, especially that famous California light. Chris Dadzidis was a systems engineer at Obscura Digital for 5 years. And he's also worked on many large-scale art projects for Burning Man and various music festivals. And for this project, he managed the application of the conceptual designs created in Beijing to the local site-specific context. And finally, we have Mel Ramirez, and Mel has been with the Asian Art Museum's preparation department for a year. They made a career in rigging and hanging lighting for theater companies across the Bay Area, including the Berkeley Rep, California Shakespeare Theater, and the Marin Theater Company. I also want to shout out to my colleagues, Allison Wyckoff and John O'Shea, as well as Nicole Smith and many other teams for their work behind the scenes on this behind the scenes program. Museums are built on the work of many hands. And I want to thank all of you, especially our members, for your ongoing support of the Asian Art Museum. It's an honor to provide programming in this challenging time, and we're so grateful for your attendance and your support during the pandemic. So with that, I'd like to start the program, and the first thing we'd like to do is share with you a short time-lapse video of this installation being installed. So John, could you cue the time-lapse video, please? Thank you. So now I'd like to hand it over to Abby Chen. And Abby, could you start us off and tell us the genesis of this project?
Well, I will really need to try to hold myself together. I mean, watching that timeline really bring back a lot of wonderful memories because we installed this whole mega project during COVID, and so many things happened last year. And I try to remember how did we start this whole idea. I joined the museum in 2019 to head the first contemporary art department. And the moment I walk into the museum with that hat on, the first thing that I encounter is actually this North Court or the Bogart Court. And it's the public space outside of the museum gallery, and is also underutilized. And to think about starting a contemporary department in a museum that is known for caring for its classical objects, it's a big challenge to really think about how that we embed the contemporary art spirit into the DNA of the museum. And so this Bogart Court become really the testing ground to think about all of these ideas and how different sort of practice clashes, and also how to bring people together. So the first time I look at this building, I need to go back to the history of how that this building come into place. So, you know, our museum was first in the Golden Gate Park, and then they moved to this new location in 2000. And we were expanding where this current location, where it used to be the San Francisco Library. And we had the phenomenal architect at the time, Gail Lente, the woman architect from Italy. And she had the idea to expand this museum by introducing the light. And she said, I want the light to come in. So the contemporary art started way before when this department was starting. And so Gail Lente started with this idea on letting the light in. And then I think for the contemporary department, what we're thinking is, okay, now we have the light. So what are we going to do about it? And the person immediately came to my mind was Zheng Chongbin. And Chongbin, would you help me show the image that we talked about? And the museum, of course, has already worked with Zheng Chongbin as early as 2011. The museum was the first institution in the United States to collect Zheng Chongbin's work by offering a commission work called Ended Season. But his work doesn't stop there. And this is, of course, on the left, what you're seeing on the screen is the lobby of the North Court before the work got installed. And then on the right is when the work is completed. But what really intrigued me about Zheng Chongbin's work is his ability to combine light and his ink practice. And what we're seeing right now is the artwork that he did in the Shanghai Biennial called The Sky Wall. And what you see is the ink painting, the abstract ink painting that Zheng Chongbin was created site specifically for the Shanghai Biennial, but also combined with the light. So Chongbin has this ability in a complete dark site. He can create a work that introduces the light and manipulate the light based on the inspiration from the light and space movement in California. And then he was invited to Kyoto in this oldest temple. What is it called, Chongbin? Kenji? Yeah, Kenji. Yeah. So this is one of the oldest temple in Kyoto, and also the site, very similar to the Asian Art Museum's Bogart Court, also have a lot of restrictions. And working with restrictions is not just a physical condition, but also metaphorically, we have a lot of restrictions within the museum, just with the museum setting. And also in 2019, when we were thinking about inviting Chongbin over, we knew that this is the work that was gonna make its debut in 2020. And 2020, we all know, is an election year. So when Chongbin and I were brainstorming on not only how to bring this work to activate this space that is very spacious, is a light field, but also what kind of the hidden message that we want to share with the public in terms of, in the election year, what we were expecting. And Chongbin had this idea, and at the time he said, I have this vision, but the title is gonna be I Look for the Sky. And I'll have Chongbin to go further on why he thought about that title. But I think at that time, we were all looking for hope. And at that time, no one knew we're going to be hit with this global pandemic like never before. So, so that is kind of the background on Chongbin's, how that he come to think about the concept of this piece. But then on the other hand, working in a museum like Asian Art Museum, I have to say, I have so much admiration with the people that I work with, and especially this tradition of caring for the object. I mean, in this museum, we really treat object and the way to care for this object like a form of art itself. So how, in the contemporary art world, how do we translate that care to the object, to the care of the people, and to the care of the ideas? So I think this panel that we're doing today, that hosted by Deb, is really amplifying this idea on how the museum could also become a place for care of human beings, not just the artifact that we have. So, and just a shout out to Deb. Many people don't know that you also wear multiple hats in addition to being the education director of the museum. And she is also spearheading our Rehistory project and also the DEAI initiative within the museum. And our director, Jay, also had this idea of turning the museum inside out. And as you can see, if you walk by the High Street at night, you will see Chanel Miller's work, I Was, I Am, I Will Be, and also Jennifer Waffer's work, Pattern Recognition. And so this idea of really going outward to bring the museum to the street was a huge idea. But then at the same time, bring the outside into the museum is to carry on the legacy that Gay Alente has left us by introducing the light into the museum. And now we have an artist that is sculpting it. So, so with that, I would like also to talk a little bit about, at the time, how our understanding of the space and also the understanding of working with Chongbin and working with the different team. As you can see, Chris is a very experienced, kind of like a jack of all trades, engineer, artist, and also many of our installers in the museum are artists themselves. They're very active in different kind of community works. And so the museum is never about the final product. And both the traditional art or the contemporary art, the process is equally important, if it's not more. So this is also really an attempt to think about how, as a museum, that we can bring more of that process forward. And also, working in the contemporary art field, I do see certain kind of practices and certain kind of processes that might work very well for the way that we care for object and we curate object and showcase the object, but not necessarily for contemporary art. So many of the practices from this particular project that we are able to experiment, there's a lot of internal debate, discussion, and trial and errors that are happened. But then at the same time, this knowledge that we're building together, one, just a very direct impact is understanding this space, the structure of this space so much better. And of course, I'll have Chongbin to talk a little bit more, and Chris can definitely talk a lot more about that. But then also how we think about that this space is a fertile ground that we can grow something very organic that is very much to the DNA of the museum. So with that, I would love to, listen to these artists together, and also the audience, and I know we were only able to open for a very brief period. And many of our audience are not able to come in to see that yet. So this is a little bit like behind the scene, backstage sort of precious moments that we can share with you. And I try not to get into the sort of wish and also the desire to go back to the museum to experience the artwork myself, because it could get very emotional for me to think about being in this physical space and how much I look forward to returning. But then at the same time, I hope that today our discussion and our sharing today can bring you this preview of what could be preparing you walking in and encounter this piece, and having more context and having more knowledge about how this piece is being made collectively, both inside of the museum and outside of the museum, and how different parts of the museum work together. I mean, Deb, did I miss anything that we talk a lot before?
That was great. No, that was great. That was a wonderful introduction, and I didn't know all of that thinking that went into your choice of Chongbin. That was interesting to hear. So let's hear from Chongbin, if that's okay with you. We'll pass the baton over to
Definitely, yes.
The artist.
Well, thank you, Debbie, to giving us opportunities. I've actually the first time never really publicly talking about the whole process of the piece. Obviously, I think what Abby just said, described the entire stories from the beginnings of the idea of turning to the museum, a change in the museums, which is you can feel a lot of dynamics internally, externally, all clashes and all together. And I feel that it's a really important when I think about the pieces on the site, especially created on the site. You always wanted to have its strong connection, have it to the access to the what is going on with the site, whether physically with the site or the story behind the site of the places. So it does, and it's the same idea, same experience when, as I went in the beginning, I was starting like very early on when I walk in the space. It's a really catch your eye is the just enormous light from the above, so I often feel that this is the place that is where you can actually access to think about outside, not only inside. And so to make place alive, and I think the piece for the light and the space pieces always have the anchor that are being growing, that has to grow on the actual space. And they to me, they are the living pieces. They are not really just finished object pieces. They have dynamic, they engage with people. And so my intention is always interested in a way finding that is equal independence of the media and materials that has its own way of its own way of forming and own way of have its own agency, material as agencies, has its own dynamics. The way how that interact with the space, and including us, including the viewer. including myself in terms of working into it. It's all became the entire unity of this making the connections and to giving this meaning to the space, and then at the same time really to sort of appropriated kind of resources to from this meaning, the whether from the heritage or whether from the cultural meanings that the sort of and make it in the space has a meaning, and then the questions to, and also towards the what is coming. And so I actually spent a lot of time. Abby mentioned to me this is about a year ago, before I studying their pieces, and I actually set a lot of time in a place and try to figure out how to. In the beginning, I have no idea what should I do, because the space is very challenging. You have so much of the things in a space, which is you have all the different like you have museum stores and all the different components and the lights and everything. So the way that how to transform that space and to really focus on what actually I want to make it happen. First of all is I always focus on the lights. The light is natural phenomenon, and then also lights actually it has suggest of the time and moves, and the light also really that the can interact with the media, and so and through the mediation through the media that we can actually really create a way how our experience, how perceptions that can be really get the engage with the pieces.
Chongbin, don't forget to move your slide.
Okay. Thank you. And so I had I had invited my help in Beijing, Bricks, who came, and we actually, first of all, I was thinking the need to really figure out the proportion of the work, and so I actually also thinking about the how to the piece that is in order to occupy the space and really minimizing all these distractions from different structures and lines. I mean, the distraction in terms of how I wanted to that a piece to be holds the entire space. And so what I did was wanted to create in the space, create a space, which is through the structure and created the modulars of the pieces. These are the sort of drawing that I come up thinking about, and there is overlap and a different geometry and through the different directions, whether you from the as you walk through, and there's evolved of the geometries and modulars and missing parts and all these the connections to the corridors that I created with the structures. And so these are when I started with this, I was starting at the my Beijing studio with the team. And so we're making a relatively smaller structures through the wires, use the wires. And so just to testing the space and testing the shape and testing all the completion or incompletion of the space, because one of the idea is you wanted to create the space to view, for viewer to fill it in. And the pieces I always wanted to do is that is even through the entire process, you want to giving the idea of this incompleteness, which is the way that is there is your mind can be engaged. One of the things that through the ideas working at the Kyoto installations, the Japanese gardens always that makes your mind to engage, whether there's a form, so there is the entire seeing that you cannot physically access, but your mind can engage to complete its journeys of your experience with the work. So here is my, I actually decided to use the media that is I always use, which is a scrim and the acrylic sheets. There's a treated, scored, perforated. There's also different film PVC sheets and also a transparent one and translucent one. And all these are part of the, I would call it, is part of the sort of vocabulary, the language, the way how can be used to really transform and altering the sight through the refraction, the diffractions, through your movement, in order to really to explore and investigate the work that is have its own way of forming itself. And so this is in the Beijing studio. We created just the one modulars on the same size, which we were doing in the site, and I'm just testing it in the way how that the upper layer of the installation, how it is the it's really can see occupy the space, and in terms of the scale and volumes, and I did create the part of also I created the structures in terms of giving a lot of flexibilities in terms of how I lay the panels. The panels, the picture you see in the one that with the black panels is perforated, the PVC sheets, which is really created in a multiple layer of the apertures. So it really interacting with the light. And one of the, it is very, there is many of this light effect because of, I noticed that through the entire, I noticed I've been to the museum so many times that, throughout the year, especially the first time I was looking at it, is close to the summer. The light is so intense. And my decisions based on this, what light, doing different light of day in different seasons. And so, but with the intensity of the light, and part of this is to really create kind of the, the space and also the conundrums in the way that we really wanted to see what these it's the lead me to, whether it's lead me to in terms of the way how we think about the much of the space beyond, and the way also can think about the way of the how do I think about the way of the how they used to be the paintings and painters, literary painters, the way how thinks about landscape, which is not necessarily landscape itself, but really the questioning about space and the cosmos and meaning to life. And so these are the many of the idea was coming in was sort of starting that it was working in the progress, and making a lot of different choices in terms of adding and subtracting. And this is the test of this layers of materials that is really in a different way of the consolidate or reflect and translate the light into a certain kind of language and visual language. And so you can see that the connections, this is in the studio in Beijing that how I actually tested, and here is working in the at the site before I had a final layers from underneath, but you can see the anatomy of the piece basically. And here you can see the Mel is in the boom is working in the really at the middle of the pieces, tangled in there. So it's really quite a process in terms. And this is the bricks, which I work with in the Beijing team. He actually, one of the things that I noticed, working in the space, particularly in the museum or in Kyoto, I notice there is many rules restricted. So the idea of the work is such a wild sort of freedoms and thinking, and you can imagine any way you want to, but then you have to deal with the restrictions in order to really sort of open up the pieces, and so it really is a part of the process. That process became really important because it's really how that maximize and make a piece works, but the other side of the constraining goes away, and this is when we had a work the concept and then drawings, everything was done, and at this stage we started beginning studying the engineer side of the work, which is we did a lot of the structural investigation in terms of what can be anchored, what's the weight on that, and we have various meetings with the engineers, museum, and the city engineers came, and they went through a lot of questions about the accessibilities and the limits, and also the solutions. This is you see the different color dots what's these brackets, and which is where they're placed, and so which is different color is for the different components of the work. There's
Ben, can I just pop in and say you have about a minute left, if you could.
Oh, really? Okay, I have to go faster.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
And yeah, so these are the skeleton brackets we bricks designed on the structural, and this is the same exactly dimension. We have really made it in the studio in Beijing, and he's testing the structures and the parts, and this is the finish, the pieces, which is we match in the same colors with the pieces. This is the planning for the layers, and also the entire pieces, how that is oriented with the space. And this is the drawing, show the different layers of that. And so the mention about the structure in the corridor, the geometry structure, the structures in the pod in the space. The material is made of the carbon fibers, and the connected with these nodes, which we did design stainless steel nodes, which is in a different for the entire connections for all the directions. We had also numbered all the different length, and then also there's the way how in a sequence of numbers that follow that numbers, how we constructed pieces, and here we go. It's how you can see that all the where all the perforated sheets, and which is going through, and the different positions in the structures, and the bottom is the acrylic panels with the treated film, in terms of how that the light will interact with the pieces, and there is the entire the patterns, which is there is a subtle change of the patterns through your movement, and then also the pattern, the entire piece, it does really connecting with the entire airflows, in terms of how the air influence the patterns and make a pattern moves, and these are really how that a piece is engaged and with the different entities of the space. And this is the process which Chris will fill in, how we lifting up the pieces and created the entire structure to support by one.
Chongbin, could you wrap it up, and then you'll have more time to
Okay.
answer questions and talk more as well.
Okay. Yeah, I would just show the last. This is how the piece is behind, from underneath. You won't see, but you will see from the second floor. And this is entire the sort of the I would call it in a chaos, but the chaos really is the dynamics piece. And then I also want to think that these are, you have to really engage it through how that is can piece that it really in the connection to the piece, which is the collection pieces, and reactivated the work and in this living environment. That is my kind of intention. Wanted to make pieces became whole living pieces in the many different dimensions of
Thank you for
engagement.
this image
Yeah,
is
that's it.
actually answering one of the guests' questions. Is this the final, or does it lift up even more? That view you're showing from the second floor, people are curious.
This is, it's nearly finished. It was in the process, but this is the finished version. And this is actually,
that's taken from the bridge?
This is from the bridge that
Yeah.
you see that, yeah.
Yeah. And there's another question about the water-like appearance in the acrylic sheets and the materials. Is what causes that to look like water? Is it the movement, or is it treated in some way?
Well, I actually was I had this film that is I was used and for my Kyoto project, and film basically I use the printing techniques to printing the dots and really to create it, the layers of the light filters going through the scrim pieces. And for this one, I realized I do need many of the transparent materials in terms how it can really really interact with the light from straight from above through different layers. And so these are clear film, which is also treated scored, and that score that a certain way of doing the scores that can really generate this water floating effect. And the fact that in the pieces, it's almost so real, you really feel like in layers, sort of has injected this kind of waters in it. But this entire flow and the fluxus of this sort of sequence is the open sort of suggestions to that is not only the environment, but then also to the viewers in terms of how they engage and the piece will become alive and as part of it. So,
can I also add to that, Deb, that was, you know, when we create site-specific work, there's always surprises. And so while Chongbin was kind of incorporating a lot of these motion into this work, even that it's a still piece and the motion is triggered by our body's movement. But then on the other hand, our building has a very unique characteristic, which is the ventilation system. And then so the ventilation system will slowly move. I mean, it's hard to notice at all with the object itself, but then somehow the ventilation will cause a very, very micro movement on the panels. So you will see almost like the water is constantly flowing, even if you don't, as a body that you don't move, but you will still be able to see it in certain panels. So that was a nice surprise. And you can't really predict that.
Thank you, Abby, for adding that. I'd like to move us along because I want us to hear from two other individuals very involved in aspects of this installation. Chris, we'd love for you to take it from here.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. I just this was a great pleasure to work with Chongbin and the whole team at the museum doing this. I've actually met Chongbin, I think, 2015. I'll give you a quick background. Um, we did a small digital arts project. I believe it was an art show in New York. And then I got to see him again in Chicago a couple years later, where he did some content for the Mart, but and also another digital piece of media. So I only knew Chongmin really through his digital media, which is crazy because he has such an appreciation for all materials and media and just everything light and elements. So highly recommend everybody research the rest of his work just to see it because it's all beautiful, and it's really cool to work with an artist that has an appreciation for those things, because I've become like a sterile engineer that just wants to get things done, and I love working with artists that have the vision, and I get to do all the grunt work of figuring it out or helping that come to fruition. So that's pretty cool. And another hats off to his team in China, because basically I was pulled in. I can't remember if originally he wanted me just to be kind of help on the ground if the team was still going to come in, but it turned out that none of them could come from China. So, but they had done all the planning and engineering and fabrication of this amazing structure and bits. I wish everybody could actually play with it because it is such a cool thing to do. And so let's get into that. So the first and foremost thing, I consider this project for me to be like three elements, which would be this main support structure or grid, or almost like giant erector set. And then there's the acrylic sheets, which are underneath it. And then there's also the rigging points and clamps that they have fabricated that we clamped onto the that V channel you see in those pictures. We'll go through that in a minute also. So here is probably the first structure I think we built. And if you see in the top part of the photo, there's just a bunch of struts there. There were probably 50 different length struts. And the cool thing is basically the China team made all this, meticulously labeled everything, put it in a box and shipped it over here. And so I couldn't ask for a better situation where there wasn't really instructions. There was kind of a little bit of direction, but it was just kind of taking something that was really well designed. And then we had a 3D model in SketchUp, which also you could click onto one of these struts and it would give you the length. We could go find that length, bring it over, and then build it in 3D space. Let's see here. So here's a box of struts. And so each bag had a specific length. And, some of these structures had one piece that was one length. Some of them had like 50 different struts, all the same length. So we had, basically a 30-foot line of all the struts laid out as we built each of these structures one by one. Here are the custom fabricated ferrules or junction blocks that each of these struts screwed into. And then here's a close-up of the strut itself. And you can see the tag where they actually had labeled the exact length in millimeters, 230 millimeters for that single strut. And if you look on this design, I wish everybody could play this if people are like erector sets and toys and whatnot, because this is basically like a very advanced tent pole. You've got a carbon shaft with an insert in here that then goes into this stainless sleeve with a set screw. So before you do the set screw, it actually allows you to, with threads right there that allow you to screw this in to the ferrule or block. And then the strut can actually spin until you actually tighten the set screw down. So that helps a lot as you get bigger and bigger in the structure. So that was great. Here's just some of the floor assembly. And it's funny, as we jumped into this on the first or second day, we realized that I thought it was I kind of saw it as an insight into how brains work, because I think everybody that went to the computer to kind of, I don't know if anybody's ever played in 3D, but you can kind of take this and spin it around, and you had to kind of visualize what's the best way to lay it on the floor and build it. Like what's the most flat area we could build up from, but then also have to zoom in and see which part of the structure we're going to build next, get the strut length, and then figure out where it goes and what direction and whatnot. And it's funny because it was, for me, and I think it was for other people too, going from the computer, you would figure something out and then you would walk away from the computer and see it in real life. And it was a complete switch of how my brain worked. And that was one of the slower parts where I would have to slow down and be like, okay. And I would have to go back and double check my work multiple times. So I wasn't doing everything wrong, but it was a cool kind of experiment in how brain works and what you can visualize and transfer from like a screen to real life. And there's us constantly checking on the 3D model. The cool thing is there were 7 of these main structures, and then 2 different shapes. So once we built one of them, it was very easy as for to copy the one to another without using the 3D model. And that definitely helps speed things along. Because basically building this from a 3D model, I think one of them took almost 3/4 of a day. Plus we had some mistakes along the way, whether it was like putting the wrong strut in the wrong place. But we worked through that. It was actually really fun. It was I consider myself lucky to have, you know, it's always fun building art, but it's also always fun building fun art or interesting art. And this was really a cool project. So once those structures were built, that's us assembling more. We had the, you know, once this is, I think all 7 laid out on the floor. And at that point, we kind of knew what we were working. I mean, we knew what space we were working in. I wanted to lay them out in proper space where Chongbin had them, you know, orientated right. And then basically from there, we would have to say, okay, how are we going to rig this and lift it up? And so this is the window framing, I guess, if you want to call it, that's above the whole structure. And the cool thing is, yet another awesome thing about this team, they came in and measured all these struts. So if you look at this horizontal beam, this vertical beam, and then these 2 vertical beams, these are all 3 different sizes, and they all got a different size clamp and mechanism to clamp onto this structure to give us some rigging points to basically drop down to the structure. One other thing is Chongbin didn't want to use hoist motors or anything like that, or even bridles, just to keep the space open and airy, which means, well, one of the great things is all of this material is actually pretty lightweight in terms of rigging. Those structure frames themselves without the added material, I think were about 150 pounds. The acrylic sheets, I can't remember the calc on it, but I think it was maybe 180 pounds. The structure, when we added some material into it, I'm sure only probably gained another 20 or 30 pounds. And every one of these things probably has at least 6, if not up to 10 or 12 different rigging points on it to help distribute the weight load and, you know, support it, but also some of them even guided it or pulled it into place into the 3D space that Chongbin wanted to have. You'll get to talk to Mel next. Mel was a goddess and amazing worker. He was in a lift most of the time. Once we started hanging brackets, you'll see, I don't know if we have any good pictures of that, but there's, I can't remember the final count, but there's probably upwards of 60 brackets attached to this structure. And she hung, I think, almost all of them. So, not to mention, weaved her way through the structure when we had to do things. Hopefully there's pictures and video of that, but you know, she's manipulated a boom arm inside this whole structure that's just a giant mess of cabling and material. So that was pretty amazing to see also. Let's see. Let me get out of this. After those 7, actually one quick thing about these structures. The cool thing is most of them, I believe it was like 6 or 8 different rigging points on them. And unfortunately, all those rigging points weren't plumb up in the air. So as it was a giant experiment into how forces work, because, you know, you had a bunch of directional forces that would kind of pull it this way or that way that we had to account for. But it was a really interesting project just to see how, you know, it would be a great learning experience for people that were interested in rigging and also just physics in itself, because it was, you know, I was amazed by it just playing with it. This is where we laid out all the acrylic sheets on the floor. So once we had the support structures in place, we laid the acrylic on the floor to kind of see where we wanted them in relation to the grid structures. And once that happened, it was kind of my job to figure out, since they were acrylic sheets and on the, well, slightly heavier side, almost 200 pounds, the goal was to pick these, we wanted, like, you know, plumb lines from the sheet itself straight up, so we could basically support the sheet better and not flex it and just let the weight of the sheet fall and support it. So if you look, so we were basically at the mercy of, let's see.
Chris, and I'll just interject, you have a minute left.
Okay. So if those sheets were like right here, we would take in a laser line and figuring out exactly on this rack or this structure where we could put those brackets to actually run a plumb line to support that structure properly. So that was kind of a fun part. And let's see, there's Chongbin doing his job. All right, we're gonna be clear. That was another cool thing to see him, you know, having to visualize what everything's going to look like on the floor, but still having a realizing what his choices would do once it's in the air, which was kind of cool. My brain doesn't work that way, but thank goodness his does. So, and this is, I think, the first time we lifted one of those sheets, which, you know, the first one's always the hardest. And the cool thing is, if you'll see in these other pictures, once we had this thing rigged up properly, we basically put that team of 8 people on it, and we could hand lift the whole sheet up, because as you lifted up a part of it, you could just pull on the cable. It was basically like a Verloc style grip, and you would just do the whole sheet level and just keep working it up. And then once we ran out of floor height, we would actually, that's where we started using a scissor lift to help us just lift it. And then we even had push sticks to help accommodate pushing up on those anchors as it went. So that was actually also one of the fun parts of doing that.
Chris, there's a question that I think really applies to what you're talking about, which is, it seems that aspects of the installation were set in advance, but others were decided on site. Excuse me. Can you speak of how you dealt with those, like the changes that you had to make? Could you talk about some of that? Any adaptations?
Well, if you saw Chongbin's plan earlier, he had his choice pick points in relation to the support structure and where the clamps would go. And once we kind of got it on the ground, I realized that wasn't going to help me much. And we were just kind of at the mercy of where we could hang the clamps itself and then work from that. And so that was, it was a great starting point, but then kind of just like throwing that away and redoing it ourselves. Oh, one other thing I was going to mention, the one interesting thing is I think we took about a month to do this. And we did install this during the election. And I'm also thankful that we had this as a distraction, because otherwise I would have just been sitting at home watching the TV way too much. And just realized that art is a great, I know people have been cooped up in their houses for almost a year, but art is a great distraction from our current events. So don't be afraid to get out there and do something, whether it's at your house or, even out in the park or whatever. But, it can help fill the soul. So. Do it.
It is kind of a therapy that I see that Chris is every 10 minutes checking on the phone, see what's the news evolves.
I think at one point we were all the preparators were kind of gathered around Chris's table, and we were listening to the results of the election because they had called it that day, and it was it just felt really monumental to be listening to that moment while working on an art piece. That was really special, and also a relief.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's hard even to think back that far. Well, this is a perfect transition to you, Mel. Can you now I want to share, and I've got my cat has decided to join us.
Absolutely, co-host.
Yep, Max says hi. So let me share the image of you up in the scissor lift. Can everybody see that image?
Yeah. Oh, good old Lifty. Me and him, we got to get to know each other really well. I'm going to say thanks for having me on here. It's really an honor to get to speak about this experience. It was awesome working with Chongbin and Chris. There was also Nick, Chongbin's assistant. I got to shout out the other 2 preps in the photo. You could see one, Yutang, cut off from the photo, Serena, who I think I saw attending this on the attendees list. I think Abby was saying something earlier about how do we extend our care to the materials, and how do we extend the care to the people and the ideas. I like to think that preparators are the application of these principles, where, Chongbin as an artist, he knows how to extend his hand and brush on a sheet of paper. Like, this is how I imagine it. But then there's, this is the physical limitations. And I'm not necessarily the brush. I'm the person who's standing on the scaffolding holding the brush, and I'm like this. That's the best way to put it. I think as this process was broken down into phases. Phase one being the conceptual, being the proofs of concepts, where Chongbin was working with his Beijing team and like working on like, how do we hang this? How is this feasible? How does this work? That's where they've hardened the concepts down and the trade and the exactly what the preparators when at the site would have to handle. And then, Chris, where he was discussing about like the ideal pick points and then reworking the pick points and like engineering that in his head, while also keeping in mind Chongbin's artistic vision. That's phase two. And phase three was, how do I get there? How do I put that up there? And it's very much like okay, you guys have a plan and that's great and that's awesome, but I physically have to put myself up like 40 feet in the air and I have to hang this thing. So how do I do that? And as a theater technician, firstly, and then an artist prep later in life, I brought my skills in basically knowing how to use a scissor lift and also an articulating boom lift. It's kind of hard to imagine, but like I have my agenda here. So imagine this is like the art piece, right? We can travel easily underneath it and you can travel easily above it, but no typical scissor lift is going to be able to pass through underneath it. You have to go around. So you'll see you saw in the time lapse video, it's like, boop, I'm there and then I'm gone. That took like 5 minutes or 7 minutes for me to set up. It would take so long. But actually that's the art for me. That's like the creative process. Like, how do you think with your left brain to get in the place to do all these things so that you may satisfy the right brain's needs. That's a very nice, pretty way of saying I hang things for a living, but that's what it is. I have to say it's been great collaborating with really great preps, very technical and like artistically like aware beings and also artistic beings. It's just been a really awesome experience. And I'll say this, I'll finish this with like an anecdote and like my personal context coming into this piece. When I first got hired by the museum, I was like so nervous because as a theater person, you break something, don't worry, it was $2 a sheet, don't worry about breaking it, not a big deal. You walk into this museum, the minute you breathe on something wrong, it is insured for thousands of dollars. I have not finished paying off my student loans. I'm not about to think about the price tag on some ancient Asian art. So that kind of experience of coming into a museum and saying, okay, this is my job now. I have to be the person, the front line of taking care of this art and also helping in preparing this art. I was very fortunate that I was mostly working in lighting, but like the thought of handling the art scared me. So, as we're like, you saw all those sticks, like I luckily got to skip that part. I missed that week. And I joined the following week, but like I did get to get my hands on it. It was very forgiving material. It is like industry grade, like very hardy material built for hanging for a year and maybe a little longer if this pandemic doesn't let us see more people. I can't speak to that. But it's very forgiving material. And I'm also going to say very forgiving artist. And the anecdote is I was helping Chongbin place one of the hold materials through a piece. And like, I'm trying to hold it. And I'm like, this is my first moment, like really like handling material for Chongbin. And like Chongbin and I were chatting a bit like during the week, but it was all like very professional at a distance. This is my first time like actually like physically helping him. And like I snap the material in half after I had placed it so perfectly. It snapped in half. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm fired. There goes my career. There goes everything. And he was like, actually, I kind of like that. And that's the beauty of art. And that was actually the beauty of working with Chongbin. He was just very like, the material is going to do what it does. And I think he spoke to that earlier. Like the material has a way of moving on its own. And like the way it places itself is the way it places itself, and also you can forgive a few cracks. And I think that's all I have to say. It was just really awesome getting to be very technical and help hang these huge, massive pieces, and also, collaborate. Where my input was just making the work environment safe and helpful and happy. Yeah, and that's what I can say about that.
Wonderful. What a joyful way to wrap the presentations. And we do have a couple of questions. Thank you all. On behalf of everyone in the audience, thank you all. So let's see if we can get through these questions. Peggy asks how many were on the team. Mel, would you take that one, or Chris?
Yeah, sure. There was of the Asian Art Museum team, there were 3 of us, up to 4 at a time. Sometimes Lauren, the lighting lead at the museum, and Neil, the carpentry lead, and would jump in. In one of the photos, you could see them there. So maybe at most, like when we needed all hands on deck to like lift those giant, like 10-foot by 6-foot pieces of acrylic, they weighed a ton. So we maybe had 8 people at max when we needed heavy lifting, and then 4 people round the clock to help get this thing in the air from the Asian Art Museum.
And you used the phrase Congress of Lifts. Was that a vernacular you all used a lot?
Eventually, I mean, like mostly after the fact. I got home from BART and I looked at my phone, and Lauren had the lighting lead. She had taken a few pictures, and at one point we had to use all the lifts to get the thing in the air. And she took a picture, and it was so funny to see like 5 different lifts all being used by different people, and she said it's a Congress of lifts. Yes, they're conferencing. And I very much liked that example. I think there was a photo of it, and you could see it in the time lapse, just like you see these like lifts positioned, and then the art's up.
Yeah, very
went
cool.
a lot slower in real life. I will tell you that it was a lot slower.
The time lapse makes it look so effortless, but we know from what we're hearing that it wasn't. So many people are asking, how long will this be on view? Abby, can you give us a date, or is it sort of indefinitely? It kind of depends at this point.
Well, we're hoping to have it on for 2 to 3 years, because we also need to see how the material will perform over the time. Just like Mel said, that is a very forgiving material. So with a very strong sunlight, we'll see how the material reacts. And also, it just, there's so many great stories behind the scene. I'm so glad that we have Mel tell a part of it. But even with our conservation, our conservation was very much about caring for the material. And there has been a fascinating dialogue between our conservation and the artist. And one of the things I remember in the long emails that they had exchanged, that Chongbin actually once said that with the work that he is doing, there's the material, but it's also the language. So what are we trying to preserve? Do we only try to preserve the material, or do we try to preserve the language? And we're really hoping for our audience coming in with these kind of stories going behind the scene, that they now are informed of, that by seeing the artwork like hanging from the ceiling and inside of the gallery, that they will make this whole picture to understand his language.
Yeah. There goes my timer. Sorry. That doesn't mean anything in particular. So Gwendolyn asks, we talked a lot about different materials. People are very curious about the materials. So what was the black material, the black platelet?
It's the PVC sheets.
Also PVC.
Yeah.
Was there any paper involved?
There is a surface. There's a paper in sandwiched. Yeah,
so there's paper sandwiched between 2 sheets of PVC.
Between 2 sheets of paper sandwiched PVC in the middle, just giving some body to it. Yeah, but you almost feel like a heavy cards. Yeah, but it's.
Did you have to kind of custom design those, or is that some
custom designs? It was the film sheets that I have to be custom designed, and we tested many different the grains of the score. I did it in several different numbers of sides, and then see how it works. And initially was working in the Kyoto project. It was doing that. Then I also tested my studio here in San Rafael, and yeah, it's one of the Abby, which is pointed out because the ventilation on the side, that part of that is on the site, just like Mel said, I always have to be. I work on all these work, and nature of working on any of these installations. I always specialize space. I don't know, some others has to be really stay on the plan. I usually giving a 60-70%, and I'm just walk away. The rest of it has to be happen on the site.
Right.
But
right.
You do kind of study on the site. It's kind of exciting to watch Mel. I mean, she is extremely skillful. I mean, maneuvering to get one point. In order to get one point, she have to move about 10-15 moves in order to get there. So it's like a play chess. And once you get that point, it's very exciting. I finally reach to it. And then
I'll spend 2 minutes there, and then I have to move again.
Move out again. Yeah. So.
And did you all have stiff necks at the end of this from doing this all day, looking up all day?
We stretched.
It seems like it was a very physical project.
Absolutely.
Times.
My arms look great.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You got really.
Oh yeah, I'm so defined now. All gone since.
Lori asked about documenting the piece. So people are concerned that they're not going to see it, so they want us to videotape it. We've done some video documentation, which is on the museum's website and YouTube channel. And there's the time-lapse video, but there's also a documentary that's being edited with the final images of the installation. But are there other plans to document the piece, Abby?
Yes, we do have a publication that is in the making right now. Mm-hmm. And this is another kind of collaboration that we're doing differently, because normally we will produce the publication before the show opens. And this is the one that we're actually waiting for the artwork to be done, and also include the process, include how the work is being made. So again, one work, there's so many new practices are being developed. So, and the book is going to be beautiful. It's headed by our wonderful Nadine Little, who is so experienced in bringing this book alive with wonderful designers. So we're really looking forward to the book as well, that has Chongbin's essay. I wrote an article.
Uh-oh. Abby froze. Or is that me?
Yeah.
Well, while she's unfreezing, Chongbin, Mel, Chris, any final words? Last thoughts that you'd like to share? I think we've gotten through all of our questions.
One of the things I really wanted to say, I've been sort of very fortunate, the working with all the people around, like Chris, and then also the Mel, which is first time working in a museum, and see how professional they are. Every one of them, actually, it's a really amazing that they have their own way how to figure out a way to do that. It's very proactive, and so also really come up with the way, quickly solutions. And Chris is he's a genius of many projects. I mean, I feel lucky because initially we were having Bricks is under the Chinese version of Chris, basically, but he worked with me and all through the different project. He knows what kind of we want. But this is sort of because of COVID, and it sort of made a different plan. But that doesn't change the entire choreography of the teamwork, which is really, I feel very fortunate. And the other one interesting phenomenon is that as being kind of the reason I'm set the studio in Beijing is also there's one of this advantage. You can done things there so quick. And so with the testing and everything's, this connecting knots of this for the structures. You know, initially with aluminum, and then it was like all thousands of sets done in 3 weeks, and then if it doesn't work well, and we change it to stainless steel. And then we demanded needed to be finished with 1 week. So 1 week it delivered another 1,000 sets. You know, those are kind of things. It's a really also kind of I feel like a really in the sequence, in the time anticipation, that it can really really sort of connect it kind of very smoothly. Rather you have to have a wait for many, you know, different. So that kind of a flow, which is years of collaboration, that is really to this point. So
well, and a shout out to those engineers and fabricators in Beijing for helping this your vision come into play. So it's really so many folks and geographies that played a role. So yeah, way to go, Beijing team.
So,
yeah,
thank you.
Abby, sorry we lost you. Did you want to say any final words? We're wrapping up.
Well, we'll all look for the sky
Yeah.
in this time in the world, and let's remain hopeful.
Definitely. Yep. Definitely. Well, I just want to thank all of our presenters. Thank you. This was really fun and interesting, and we will post the video of this gathering on our YouTube channel in probably a week or so. So please share it widely with your friends and encourage people to visit the Asian Art Museum when we get out of the purple zone. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you. Be safe. Thank
you.
you.
Be well. Take care. Bye.